For Telesur, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas. Israel relaunched attacks on Gaza today, killing at least 5 as the ceasefire came to an end. Palestinians and Israelis continued negotiating a longer truce in Cairo, but as we go on the air, there are reports that Israel has withdrawn from the talks. Hamas officials affirm they are committed to a long-term truce. More now from our Gaza correspondent, Noor Harazim.
Well, yes, at 8 a.m. Gaza time and shortly after the 72-hour ceasefire ended, there has been several Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip. At the same time, there are statements from the Palestinian militant groups that they are firing rockets, especially Al-Quds Brigades, which is the militant wing for Islamic Jihad. At the same time, there has been at least 3 Palestinians killed in several Israeli attacks, different Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip, in Khan Yunis, in Jabalia, and in Rafah, including a 10-year-old child. There has been also 30 injuries reported only today. The Palestinians on the ground are optimistic that the talks in Egypt are going to come out with a long-term truce, despite the fact that we're getting some news from Egypt that there is some problems happening between the Palestinian political factions and at the same time the Israeli delegation, because they are not accepting the fact that Gaza should be reconstructed and the siege on Gaza should be lifted without withdrawing all of the Palestinian militants' grouped weapons.
Hamas officials say they are committed to a long-term truce, but that Israel has not responded to Palestinian demands during negotiations. A key priority for the Palestinians is the lifting of Israel's 7-year blockade on Gaza. According to the UN, the blockade bars essential foodstuffs and medicines, prompting an ongoing humanitarian crisis. At least 60% of Gazans regularly lack food or are on the verge of hunger. The blocking of construction materials has prevented the building of over 300 schools in Gaza. The UN considers the blockade a form of collective punishment, a crime under international law. U.S. fighter jets continued attacks in Iraq today, the second round of bombings. President Obama confirmed the U.S. military will target areas held by the Islamic State in northern Iraq. He says he won't allow militants to threaten U.S. interests. The move follows an Iraqi failure to halt the advance of the Islamic State, which prompted tens of thousands of people to flee into the mountains. The Islamic State emerged in the wake of the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq and was revitalized in NATO-protected areas in Syria. This most recent Iraqi crisis has displaced 1 million people and killed over 8,000. Earlier this week, one of Argentina's stolen grandsons was reunited with his family. Today, we get a chance to see him for the first time. Our correspondent in Argentina, Leo Caduri, continues to follow this good news story.
Yes, a very warm welcome to you and all our viewers of Telesur in English, wherever the world you may be. Here to a very iconic part of Argentina's struggle in human rights. We're right in front of the Abuelas de Plaza de Mayo, the grandmothers who are searching for their children abducted by the brutal civil military dictatorship of 1976 to 1983. This week was recuperated the grandchild of Estela de Carlotto, who is the president of this organization. His name is Ignacio, well, at least that's the name he was raised up with. Now, the abuelas have been searching for Guido now for 37 years. When asked by the press which name he will adopt, he said that he will continue to use Ignacio. It's natural for people to call him Ignacio. They've been calling him that for over 30 years now, but he is respectful that his name is also Guido. That's at least the name that these abuelas have been searching for all these years. As more information evolves from Argentina, Telesur in English telling you this side of the story. We'll be here to let you know. Thank you. Back to you.
Staying with Argentina, President Cristina Fernandez says that the decision of U.S. Judge Thomas Griesa in favor of the vulture funds violates the sovereignty of the South American nation. Her country will appeal the ruling to the International Court in The Hague.
Las cuestiones que hoy se están suscitando con las expresiones y resoluciones.
Today, what this municipal judge is prompting with his remarks and resolutions is to block a solution and destroy the sovereignty of a country, even putting those 539 million pesos in a legal limbo, which is now not Argentina's money, but the creditors' money.
en un verdadero limbo jurídico.
And to the presidential campaign in Bolivia, current President Evo Morales continues to defend his decision to nationalize Bolivia's major gas company, YPFB. His rival, Samuel Doria Medina, calls for half of the profits from the privatization to go to private capital.
I regret that there's still a mentality advocating privatization amongst some candidates. I regret it a lot, and some will never forget. This 50-50 announcement made by Gonzalo from the MNR party, and what an economic and democratic situation they've left us. To all of the Bolivian people, I want to reiterate my way of seeing it. A businessman, politician, will just watch over their interests and his international colleagues' interests, and never will they think of the Bolivian people's interests.
And to Venezuela, where a debate continues on a possible increase in petrol prices. Prices there have been frozen for 17 years. Gas remains among the cheapest in the world. The government believes reasonable price adjustments in Venezuela could free up more than $12 billion to fund social programs. The government has promised that increased revenues will fund university scholarships and programs aimed at helping the elderly, improving security, boosting social housing, and improving roads. This Friday, the World Health Organization declared Ebola an international health emergency. The epidemic continues infecting new victims in West Africa amid fears it will spread beyond the region. The EU insists that Europe faces an extremely low risk from the Ebola virus. So far, the outbreak has caused nearly 1,000 deaths. It marks the worst Ebola epidemic in 4 decades. The World Health Organization calls for an international coordinated response to the virus
as soon as possible.
The fighting in eastern Ukraine continues. This Friday, the government revealed that a Ukrainian fighter jet was shot down. The jet was downed near the site of the Malaysian airline crash. Meanwhile, Russia arrested 5 Ukrainian soldiers on charges of using prohibited methods against civilians in eastern Ukraine. Those included the use of phosphorus bombs. Russian media reports that the men had crossed the Russian border with their battalion earlier this week. Rival presidential candidates in Afghanistan agreed to form a unity government today after months of dispute over election results. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry mediated the agreement between Abdullah Abdullah and Ashraf Ghani. An attempt to resolve the conflict by a NATO-supervised audit of the ballots failed last month. Meanwhile, NATO military operations in Afghanistan continued. U.S. airstrikes killed at least 38 people this week. The Gramado Film Festival in Brazil started today, attracting 150,000 visitors from Brazil and abroad. Not bad for the first night. It marks the 42nd edition of the festival. 68 Brazilian and Latin American films are competing for awards in 24 categories. Since 1973, the festival has taken place in the city of Gramado at the initiative of Brazil's National Cinema Institute. We have more on those and other stories at our website, telesurtv.net/English. For Telesur English, I'm Cody Weddle.